Hey my friend, I'm Jonah and welcome to Lion's Mane Media. In this week's video I wanted to talk a bit about world building in a way, but with one particular focus, which is on the governments in those worlds, and also what stories can often let us know about them in real life. Because one of the things about stories is that they give us that space to ask, what if? Which does tend to lead to interesting worlds, and sometimes even actually makes discussing government fun in a way, because it's kind of one of those subjects that you often don't talk about it unless someone's really passionate about it, and then sometimes you definitely don't want to talk about it in that case. And yeah. Now, the thing about governments and stories is that they will work however the writer wants them to. But there is a thread that often decides whether a government will be for good or for ill. And granted, this is probably mostly my perspective based on what I know of history, human nature, and stories. But you can let me know if you agree on what I kind of believe the thread is, and if it's even a thread at all, or if it's just me kind of realizing the common trait of all of these. And I have divided this into broad categories, although there's probably some that you might consider I missed. But again, it's probably mostly due to nuance and mixing that goes on between these. But anyway, let's get into it. Now the first is on theocracy, which is kind of like the combination of the two things you don't really want to discuss with anyone, which is politics and religion, and is put into one in a government form. And the thing is, it's generally seen in fantasy worlds and so forth, where a deity is either kind of ruling the people directly, or there's some sort of religious order that is supposedly speaking for the deity. And that's often the thing, is that it depends on the deity if they're in control, and it depends on who's ever speaking. And again, the morality of that can be very different, because again, we have, like classical Greek mythology, those deities weren't nice people. So can you imagine someone like that being the ruler of a nation? It's like, doesn't sound like it would go too well. And again, there's been lots of corruption in various religions over the years, and it's like, what would stop it from happening in theocracy? And again, there's always a morality thing there. And as a side note, one of the things that often strikes me as odd is that, well, it doesn't strike me as odd that Jesus was this, but the fact that people often assume that he was always speaking about their form of government, when Jesus is basically the theocritus, or however you want to say it. Again, he used the lens of monarchy because that's what the people would understand, but he always talked about the kingdom of heaven, of God's rule, rather than the rule of the governments of the day. And his thought was the theocracy overall, rather than the kind of Caesar being God, or however you want to say it. So it's just kind of a different perspective on things. Now, second, since we kind of touched on the monarchy, is the monarchy and dictatorships. And even going further, we could go into the nobles and elites, because it's always putting someone on a pedestal in a sense, of them having the right to rule. Like, there's always that thing of the divine right to rule, whatever that is, or rule by bloodline. And the thing is, or by power. And that's the thing, is, how are they restrained? Are they restrained by their own morality, or do they have other systems in place to kind of control that? And again, it's then put the morality is placed on an individual or group of individuals, whereas how will they treat the people? Do they see themselves as servants of the people, or do they see themselves as who the people should be serving? And now the third is the democracy, which is basically ruled by the people. And the thing with a group of people is that a group of people can easily become a mob just by one person. So there's always that thing with democracy, is that depending on how it's set up, one person can always shift the tide completely in one direction and just get everybody going, unless the people are actually like, wait a minute, can actually snap themselves out of it at some point. And the other thing is that it's slow. I mean, just imagine how slow democracy would be if not only they had to get enough votes, but they had to make sure that everyone got a vote. Like, someone could run off and delay the vote indefinitely by basically because they would need that person's tally. Like, just imagine if that was a rule in a story where everyone needed to have the vote before a decision was made. And now the fourth one is the republic, which is based in representative. And this puts it more partially on the people, but also on the representatives and that relationship that they have. And again, not every republic is kind of generally republic in a sense, because then the representative is supposed to be almost like a voice for the people. But oftentimes, that representative can be more of what's best for the representative rather than what's best for the people, or what the people actually want. And so there's always that thing of, okay, is the representative doing what the people want? And then the fifth one is constitutional, and it's based on a document. So it kind of avoids the human nature or whatever that these other ones go into, in a sense, because sometimes we can put ourselves on the line for a little bit, or direct the highest parts of us to write something and be like, okay, these are the rules we will follow, these are it. And again, this is often mixed with another form of government, but it's kind of trying to curb human nature in a sense, by saying these are the rules that we will follow, these are our laws, this is the contract we have between this government and the people. And then, in almost complete opposite, we have no government, which is basically pure rule by human nature. And that's the thing, we kind of tend to think of human nature as being sort of like people are generally good or people are generally bad. And it's like, we're all kind of seared in a way. We aren't perfect. While we probably do have good nature parts in us, there's always that side that just has been kind of seared that can come out at times. And we all have something like that. And the thing is, that's the issue kind of with having no government, is that it's often those base traits that will take place. I mean, look at most post-apocalyptic stories where society has completely collapsed. It's like people aren't really nice in those generally. And so the thing is, there's always something that determines like how a government will act in a story. And it's always based on one certain trait of the government in a sense, or maybe if it would have multiple of those, it would have the multiple different traits. So that's what I kind of meant by a thread, is that there's always something in there that can kind of be pointed as, that is the determining point, that is what will determine it. Like, is the team bad or good? Or do the people need to change their perspective in order to shift the government? All those kinds of things. But that's my opinion. What do you think? You can let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more videos like this, and would support the growth of this channel, please like and subscribe. And of course, since I'm still figuring things out, I'll go with the same sign off. So I will talk to you later, and have a great rest of your day.